Should you be a developer in Singapore or Malaysia? So, in this video, we're going to share with you the pros and cons of Singapore and Malaysia and the different opportunities that you can find in both countries. My name is Haris.
My name is Derek, and today we're going to run through a few different key topics that you will benefit from. Number one, we're going to talk about the comparison of Singapore and Malaysia. Then we're going to move on to talk about the compensation and the salaries, talk about the working environment, the quality of life, and finally talking about the in-demand skills and job opportunities in Singapore and Malaysia. I am Malaysian and Haris is Singaporean. I think I want to be transparent in the pros and cons with most things. If I'm Malaysian and it means a lot to me, I want to be fully transparent as well.
Okay. So, maybe you can start off with the importance of choosing the right location to be a software developer or for your career.
I think one point to how do you define what's the right location? It's what do you think, Haris? For me, it's the kind of exposure you get to important work that makes an impact. Research, driving new technologies, innovation, rather than just doing sales and operations. Because from what I know, Malaysia is used as the hub for a lot of very sales and operational focused stuff. Whereas if you compare it to Singapore, they are the tech hub, finance hub. A lot of things that are the what you call the cutting edge stuff is all happening over there. And they only come to Malaysia not for R&D, but rather for operational stuff. Google has a tech team in Singapore, but even Grab, it used to be a Malaysian company, has their tech team now in Singapore. Some in Malaysia as well, but a lot of people, like in Google, for example, is mostly like operational stuff in.
So I would say that I do agree that Singapore is like the tech, the R&D, the brains, right? So a lot of people come to Singapore to maybe do research and invent certain technologies. So Singapore currency itself is actually pretty good, meaning that if you exchange one Singapore dollar to a USD, it's actually almost the same. So with that said, I would say that Singapore is an amazing place to work, right? And it's also a way for you to earn quite a good sum of money and you're able to actually travel overseas. So as a Singaporean working in Singapore, we see Malaysia more towards a place for us to visit or to go as a tourist vibe kind of thing. While Singapore is just, it's really work. You can get some enjoyment, but most of the time we go overseas and we have that amount of like currency to spend in
So if you're
Malaysia.
talking about building a career, obviously you want to be building your career in somewhere where it's more economically rewarding, somewhere where you have more visibility in terms of what the HQ is working on, somewhere where you have more involvements with the cutting edge new stuff that's going on rather than just following orders. And obviously that's career-wise, right? Why stay in Malaysia? For me, it's your family's here. I was raised here. The people here are nice. I guess if there's only one thing, I would say it's a laid back culture. Like, no one's really watching over your backs. There's no like hard fixed rules over everything. You're more chill to do whatever you want to do.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. Like when I went to Malaysia, I don't feel the vibe of people rushing to places. People are a little bit more chill. And in Singapore, I would say that it's a very good place to work if you love working, right?
I think to quickly summarize, why would someone choose Malaysia over Singapore is really for a more chill lifestyle, cheaper cost of living, and I guess cheaper access to talents. You want to start your business in Singapore, I would say for an equal level of talents, you'll be spending 3 times more for pretty much the same amount of output. People can debate me on that, but I would say it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I would agree. Singapore is for you to really earn, but if you want to have a business, it's expensive in Singapore because if you want to find talent in Singapore, it comes at a price. So quality wise, I'm not too sure because I've been in Singapore for many years.
Malaysians have a lot of talent, man, Haris. I'm going to tell you that. Malaysian talents are great. We work hard, we're smart, we study and all that. We're pretty much equal in terms of IQ and capabilities to a Singaporean, but we're getting paid 3 times lesser. So to every potential employer out there, think about Malaysia when you want to hire people. Make sure you get the revenue in from Singapore, right?
Honestly, you have a business in Singapore, but you hire Malaysians. I think that's, the best, right? But talking about pay, let's move on to the next topic, right? So we roughly have an idea of like how Singapore is as like in the sense of work culture. Now let's talk about compensations and salaries. And I think a lot of people are interested about it.
But before we go into compensation, we have to talk about how we got to those numbers. We talk about the economic overview of both countries. If we look at it, right? You look at the GDP of Malaysia, right? It's actually 300 plus billion, 370 billion, something like that USD. And you look at Singapore, it's also around that range, 300 plus billion. But now look at the GDP per capita, for sure, Singapore is around 7 times per capita, right? Stronger salary, stronger currency rate, stronger purchasing power means that you guys get paid, I think base salary for entry level is like 3,000 Sing dollar. And for Malaysia, entry level is around 3,000 ringgit, right? But the thing here is 3,000 ringgit, and for us to buy a pack of chicken rice, that's 10 ringgit for lunch. For you
Yep.
guys to buy like lunch is, I'm guessing, average $5. Is that correct?
Roughly around there. Yeah. And even cheaper, like maybe 4
Right.
or
So you're
3.
making more but spending less,
Yeah.
which doubled up the spending power that you have.
Yeah, exactly. So like in terms of the economic wise, like I would say even in Singapore, the cost of living, I would say, is not as bad as people might think. You can definitely live a good lifestyle in Singapore if you earn big bucks, even with 1,000 Singapore dollars. I would say that if you earn Singapore dollars, the opportunity for you to travel overseas is higher. You are able to spend quite a good sum of money overseas because Singapore's currency, I would say amazing because I'm Singaporean, right? But the cost of living in Singapore is not very expensive, but it's not also very cheap. It's like in the middle. I would say like you are surviving in Singapore, but you're not thriving in Singapore. So that's
Correct.
what a lot of Singaporeans are feeling. While in Malaysia, you can feel a bit more chill because I feel like in Singapore, there is that comparison. Hey, this person is earning more than me.
Maybe that Singaporean in general is a little bit more competitive in nature. And it's fair because you guys have one of the best infrastructure in the world to attract all the best talents over. A lot of smart people from everywhere gets attracted to Singapore, and that kind of increases the barrier of entry level of smartness, competitiveness in Singapore, which
Exactly.
makes sense.
Yeah. So for me, I would say that's true because we are like a place where a lot of people overseas actually come to work in Singapore. And in Singapore, we have a high barrier of entry for people working in Singapore as well. If you're a developer, you're considered like a high skilled worker, and your minimum salary in Singapore is 5,000 at least. So now I think it increased to 5.5.
Wait, what is
So
this? Entry level developers?
yeah, entry developers. I'm
0.5.
not kidding. So if you're a skilled worker in Singapore, your minimum salary must be 5.5. If not, by law, we cannot hire you. Yeah, so we
Oh,
need to give you a
you're
minimum
talking
salary.
about
And the thing is, that's like your base. So that's your minimum. And you're going to increase in terms of your earning potential, especially if you're in the tech industry. You're a foreigner, so you need to pay for rent. And that's pretty high in Singapore right now, right? Even if you get the cheapest, you can get a room itself. Like you have to think of like when you move to a certain place, right? You have higher expenses, right? 5.5K might be a lot to many people, but then you have to pay for this, for that. So I would say like salaries, of course, in Singapore is amazing. We attract a lot of talents because of this like big tech companies. But at the same time, an interesting thing is when I ask other Singaporean friends, right, if they want to move to Malaysia, all of them say no. And I say, okay, imagine I pay the same salary. They all say no. And I was like,
they
why?
said no as well.
Yeah, they say no as well. Like salary in terms of like relative salary, meaning if they earn, for example, 5,000 in Singapore, they'll earn 5,000 ringgit in Malaysia. Because I feel like it's roughly around the same of quality of life. Maybe I'll pay 6K ringgit in Malaysia. They say no. They say, I cover your rent. They also say no. So like you could see that other than Singapore being a great place, work, I think is at the same time, Singapore is very convenient. You don't have to rent a car. The transport, I think, is one of the best. When you want to go to a certain place, you can take the train, you can take the bus, you can take taxi. But when I went to Malaysia, I'm like, okay, I probably have to take taxi or probably rent a car to go most places. So I guess like in terms of living on cost, I would say like Singapore is relatively okay if you're Singaporean, but not so if you're a foreigner in a sense. But I would say if you want to travel overseas with Singapore dollars, it's amazing. So maybe Derek can start off. What is the tech industry culture in Malaysia?
One thing I realized, tech and startups as well, because I have experience in both, was that in Malaysia, funding is just so low. In Singapore, there are just a lot of grants. I personally received like one of few grants in Singapore. They made it a lot easier. Malaysia, when you have to compete and you have to fight and you have to like, whoa, there's just so many, many steps.
So I would say the environment of the tech industry in Singapore, there's a meetup. Almost every day there's a meetup before COVID. There was some like almost any kind of meetup, and mostly it's tech meetups kind of thing. And my experience is that the tech events are amazing.
I guess this brings us back to the point of exposure. My very first point between choosing your career, right, is that in Singapore, yeah, it's just more normal that you get more access to like fun, new, weird things because the fun things just go there first. The HQ is there, the R&D, the fun, great things just always go there first.
Yeah.
I guess that's, for me, money aside, that is the biggest point that I would consider for my career because I get access to the leaders, the heads, right? The people running the country or the company is there.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that Singapore itself, it's a really brain magnet for businesses, right?
Mm.
Tech or whatever. Or most of them are there, and they usually visit Singapore as well because it's a safe country and that's where business are. So maybe we can also talk about work-life balance, right? Maybe I can start off in Singapore lah. I have no
Mm.
idea what work-life balance is. I will just share from a personal experience because I've worked as a employee before and I worked in a startup before as well lah. So like work-life balance in Singapore itself, from what I've seen so far, is not as bad as what most people think it is, right? So for me in a startup, in a sense, it's flexible. There wasn't much pressure in terms of like work-life balance. But I guess in Singapore, a lot of times people are feedbacking that work-life balance isn't taken care of, right? Meaning that people are overworked or people are working, but they are not being paid according to what they're being valued as. So a lot of like times people think like they get burnout kind of thing. So I would say, okay, for me personally, I love working, so I don't see balance. My little brother is working in a government agency right now. He loves it. Like work-life balance is amazing. Like the pace of like work is very manageable. So in Singapore government agency, from what I've heard from his side of the story, it's actually pretty chill. And the people there are not very pressured.
So I guess this Malaysia has been pretty much losing to Singapore in this conversation, and you finally think we can win you once, right? The report says that Malaysia is one of the most overworked countries in the world.
Really?
Which sucks. Yeah. Of course, it depends on the company. It depends on the industry as well. I think people always talk about how the financial audit industry is very crazily overworked. So I think it really depends on the industry. Our hospital, my friend who's a doctor, is struggling a lot during his housemanship about how he's crazily working like 8 a.m. to midnight 12 a.m. and then have to wake up like 6 a.m., that kind of thing, which I think is quite extreme. And it is a problem in Malaysia. A lot of people are overworked. I guess the more future, like forward-thinking, future-proof companies will be, I guess, nicer. Western companies, like the Western conglomerates, I guess, nicer. But I would say Malaysian companies, not really known for work-life balance, not known for it. I wouldn't say all of it is bad. So I don't know how true this report is. There's an actual report about this.
Everybody has their own path of happiness. I have a friend. He is a very good student. He is now in a very good company. He's a Singaporean, but he don't want to work in Singapore. He said, I want to work outside of Singapore because Singapore is not the best place for him. He want to work somewhere that's more chill, maybe Australia, maybe Malaysia, right? Because he realized that Singapore, even though there's so much opportunities, is not for them, right? Because the lifestyle is just in it for some, right? Because Singapore is very competitive. It's all about work kind of thing. But if you want like a purpose-driven kind of life, then I don't think Singapore has that. I don't know. Maybe you can find it, but Singapore is so small.
Let's put it this way. The more comfortable you are, the less likely you are to soul search. Soul searching is a journey where you have to get out of a comfort zone to explore what is it that you truly want. And most of the time, when they call this the golden handcuffs, right? When you're getting paid a good salary, you don't have that incentive to leave your comfort zone to explore what is meant for you in this life of yours. So in Singapore, I guess what we can conclude from here is that life is just more comfortable there, which means that people are less likely to say, fuck it, and just go out and just do something different. In Malaysia, it's very easy to just say, screw it. I want to explore something else. This is not for me. It's very easy. Like for me, I think my turning points was after 3 failed internships that I really hated so damn badly. It was so bad that you need to have incidents in life that hurt you bad enough for you to make a change. It's through those very bad experiences in corporate where they made me do administrative shit and they didn't respect my opinion on how things can be better. I want to do greater things in life and I want to build amazing stuff. So I think in Singapore, I don't know, but I guess it's less easy to say that because you're getting paid so much more. You're like, okay, I can tahan lah because you're paying me 20K Sing per month. I can tahan lah. Yeah, treat me like a shit. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. If it's not a good long-term thing, if you're being paid to be tolerated because one day you can't tolerate one. So I think quality of life wise, I think Singapore, I would say it's good. Yeah, I would say, right, Singapore is good to start a family because it's safe.
I think this is a conversation I heard from a leader from some of the texts. I forgot who it is, but he talked about how in Malaysia, we are incentivized to build our system to be more user-friendly because our English proficiency level is a bit lower, where this is something that's negative to drive you to do something better. Like the fact that the country is not very supportive to you makes you need to be better. You know what I'm saying? That's benefit in Malaysia.
Correct. Most of the time when you're in a bad environment, you don't really perform that well, but the people who perform very well will be like exceptional.
I think this is a side topic, but a quick one about how does going to army affect your job?
Yeah, okay. So another thing that we can talk about is national service, right? So in Singapore, all males have to go to national service. And a lot of people say that national service is a waste of time in Singapore because it is your prime age, right? It takes 2 years of your prime age to either work or to be in university and get a job earlier. So it's very common that guys will get their first full-time job at the age of maybe 26 or even 24. So like, I think for a lot of Singaporeans, they feel that 2 years is it's a lot. It used to be 2 years and 2 months kind of thing, but now they shorten it to 1 year, 10 months for those who are very able, right? So imagine you have a business that you started before national service, and then you have to go for national service. And national service is a full-time job, and it requires you your full-time attention. In terms of money, you're not earning a lot of money. As a national service, you start at $400 per month. The pros I would say going through national service is that you actually build connections. That is your first base of connections, because usually all guys, and most of them are going to universities, most of them. So they can be your lifelong connection to getting a job in the future. So in summary, we talk about the comparison of working in Singapore and Malaysia, whether it is in the economy side of things, whether it is the quality life side of things, and whether it is the working environment and salaries as well. So in a sense, there is also like pros and cons, whether you want to work in Singapore or whether you want to work in Malaysia as well, right? If you're a risk taker, probably Singapore might not be the best for you to really take a huge risk, while maybe Derek can share about a summary of Malaysia's.
So it depends on what you think you are and how far you think you can go. I would definitely say give it a shot in Malaysia. If you're Singaporean, try it in Singapore with all the Singapore stuff. If you're Malaysian, don't be sad. It's completely fine. Take it as a blessing. No support whatsoever. It makes you strong. So don't give up. I would say either way, you can be rich in both countries.
Exactly. So I would say that I agree that pressure builds diamonds, and I would say that Singapore, we don't have a lot of pressure lah. In a sense, really is like the job most of the time, if you have very good skills, especially tech skills, or if you're a developer, really there isn't any pressure for you. Singapore is a great place, but you should also explore other places that maybe might be a better suit for you, because not everyone is suited for Singapore life. It's all work, right? If you need more work life or you need more space, right, I think Malaysia will be a good place for you. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe if you want to know more, and comment down below whether you want to be a developer in Singapore or Malaysia.